I really am struck. We had kind of like a good old-fashioned policy debate on the issues. Didn't get nasty.
Look, by the way, they're still chatting.
Still chatting. Didn't get weird. You know, they took their shots, but it was earnest. And there were even moments of kind of congeniality and collegiality.
There were a number of moments where each of the candidates turned to each other and said, I agree with you. When Governor Walz said that his child had witnessed a shooting, you heard Senator Vance say, I'm so sorry that that happened. Look, zooming out, it was clear, I think, that Senator J.D. Vance knew his challenge tonight was to come off as more likable. I received a number of texts from Republicans and Democrats who say he was very effective at doing that. He's coming off as normal, even compassionate, even on the issue of abortion and economy, one Democrat said to me. And then at the end of the night, something very significant happened, which is that Governor Walz turned to Senator Vance and said, did Trump lose the 2020 election? Vance said, I'm focused on the future. Walz said, that's a damning answer. I do think
he said it's a damning non-answer.
Non-answer. And I do think that exchange and non-answer will in some ways loom very large over what Democrats and Republicans agree was a strong night for Senator Vance.
Hallie, what was the most memorable moment for you?
I think there were a few of them. I think the one that Kristen mentions is one of them. I think the idea that the mics were, not muted at one point and then muted, and Senator Vance taking exception to that. Governor Walz calling himself kind of a knucklehead when asked to speak about an instance in which he says he misspoke about China, and an answer that was tough to follow there. I think overall, I was, like you, Lester, watching the two of them interact at the end there, because there was this sense of civility that we certainly did not see on that debate stage between the people at the top of the ticket here. What was also interesting here is the way that Senator Vance very specifically and repeatedly linked Kamala Harris to Tim Walz. Both of them seemed very clear that they know what this is about, right? This is about the principles. This isn't necessarily
even
about
at the end. They both said, vote for Kamala Harris.
That's
vote
exactly
for Donald Trump.
And on the other side, too. I mean, J.D. Vance said Kamala Harris's name 38 times. That is way more than Donald Trump ever said Kamala Harris's name.
A lot of people don't really know who these two men are.
Yeah, that's right. We talk about this being an introduction to America. You heard a lot of policy. You heard some substance there, too. So you probably have some level of takeaway if you ended up watching for the full 90 minutes. But I do think that as things move forward, I had one Democrat text me, listen, substantive, but also can't imagine this changes a whole lot in the race moving forward.
And I think the biography is important. That's why you heard both of them pause at various moments throughout the night to reintroduce themselves to Americans, to explain where they had come from, the fact that they both have served in the military, and to try to really paint themselves as people who can relate to moderates, to independents, to those suburban voters who are going to...
The closing moments, the closing arguments are always so interesting, because that's the only thing they get to plan, rehearse, memorize if they want to. And they both struck a note of optimism about the future in the country. And with J.D. Vance, frankly, it was a stark contrast to what we hear from Donald Trump, who says this country is going to HE double toothpicks, it's all terrible.
You can say the word.
Okay, hell, sorry. I don't know if my kids were still awake. But, it was interesting to see him strike that tone, because it's in contrast to what we hear from Donald Trump every day.
And he himself, just over the weekend, said, yeah, this is a dark speech. I know that I'm giving a dark speech. Donald Trump did at a campaign rally he was at. He understands that is the tone he's striking, and it was markedly different.
Have you been spun, Tom?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the spinning is just starting. The room is also starting to fill up now. I'm just looking over my shoulder to see who's here of the surrogates. We have Senator Tom Cotton is here, Representative Elise Stefanik, Governor Pritzker of Illinois, Senator Mark Kelly, and others. It sounds like we're also hearing our first sort of post-debate strategies. The Republicans are leaning into that moment that Hallie was talking about earlier, where Governor Walz was asked about his comments that were misleading about his time in China during the Tiananmen Square protest, that he called himself a knucklehead and that he misspoke. Republicans are going very hard over that. Democrats, in turn, are saying that the lies that the Vance campaign and the Trump campaign say are nowhere in comparison to that. We're also hearing a bigger debate right now about immigration. It sounds like both sides are fighting over immigration, what Vance said and what Walz said about their immigration plans, and who's to blame over the immigration crisis right now at the border and how it's changing. So I think we're sort of getting our first salvos in the war post-debate and what we're hearing here in the spin room. I also want to note we do see Secret Service bipartisan here, which leads us to believe that at least one of the two candidates who debated tonight will enter the spin room and hopefully do some interviews once they get done speaking to their own campaigns. For now, I'm going to send it to you guys as the spinning is just getting started.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom. I want to turn now to Kristen, Welker, Hallie Jackson, and Peter Alexander has joined the table. Let's get some final thoughts. Peter, you're writing your story for the Today Show tomorrow. You literally are writing your story for the Today Show tomorrow. But what's the headline to you?
Well, I think one of the biggest headlines, at least in the eyes of the Walz campaign, came in the 90th minute. It was the most contentious moment of the debate. It was on the topic of democracy, an issue that Joe Biden focused so much attention on, but it seemed to be by the wayside as it became a Trump versus Harris race right now. According to the people I'm speaking to in the Harris-Walz camp right now, they say their dial groups, the folks who say if they like something or don't like it, thought that was the worst moment for J.D. Vance. They didn't like his non-answer, his refusal to say whether, in fact, Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump in 2020 right now. They're going to try to make some hay out of that. Right now, we're already seeing what the Trump people are trying to make hay out of. It was a gaffe by Tim Walz, who himself said sometimes he has a tendency to misspeak tonight when he said that he's friends with school shooters. He meant to say, of course, that he's friends with school shooting victims. But I do think that's the key moment. And certainly I think it's a moment where they think after a night where in the eyes of the Walz folks, they think Vance came off a bit slick tonight, Yale educated. They thought that their guy, Walz, was a bit more plain spoken along the way. Again, I go back to where I started on this, though. It's not so much how you viewed what happened tonight, but it's how these are diced and sliced and how people see little moments from this tonight.
Yeah, what will people be talking about a few days from now?
Exactly
about
right.
This debate? Will they be talking about this debate?
Well, I do think that democracy thing is something that the Harris and Walz folks are going to try to lay into heavy out of this. They think it was their best moment over the course of the
But what about, let's talk about Walz's worst moment, which has to be, I would think, the part where he was asked about misstatements he's made about whether or not he was at Tiananmen Square in China. And he was sort of all over the place. Instead of just saying, look, I misspoke. And are we really talking about this thing that happened 35 years ago? So, but this are the kind of things that stick from debates like this. He said, I'm a knucklehead.
Absolutely. And Democrats reached out to say that was not a strong moment. It's worth noting this entire debate really seemed focused on trying to pin each other for being the incumbent. Remember, voters are looking for change.
Show of hands, who thinks there's going to be another debate? Nobody. What about you,
don't
Lester?
think either side, I'll leave it to you guys. You don't think there's a chance that they're going to feel they need it?
We've covered Donald Trump for a long time. There's always a chance, but right now it doesn't look like
All right,
it.
well, that concludes our coverage of tonight's vice presidential debate.
We will have more coverage ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now. Full wrap-up tomorrow on Today.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.